But on the, just pivoting to his address to Congress, I mean, you mentioned that he didn't say anything that would affect hostage ceasefire talks, but he did say some pretty derogatory things about U.S. protesters, having mentioned that this is a citadel of democracy, the United States, and then to call American protesters Tehran's useful idiots, and also to cite U.S. intelligence saying that Iran had financed protesters. That is something that has been said, but we don't know the full extent of that. Do you have anything to say in response to the Israeli Prime Minister labeling American protesters in that way, given that this is a substantial part of the voting population in this country?
Yeah, let me just speak about protests in general, and including the protests that we saw in Washington yesterday, including the statement that the Director of National Intelligence released. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. So first of all, with respect to her statement, she made very clear in releasing it that the United States, this administration, strongly support the right to protest the actions that our government takes, and that we have seen Iranian support for protests, but that we understand that the vast majority of protesters in America are not taking their orders from Iran, and that most of the people who might have received support from Iran wouldn't even know that that's where it was coming from. So I think we ought to just be very clear about the facts that the Director of National Intelligence made public in that statement she released. On the overall issue of protests, so look, as I said, this administration, the United States, and this administration in particular, strongly supports the right of any American to protest. People questioning our government, speaking up, speaking out about the policy choices that we have made. It's part of the healthy democratic process. It actually strengthens the fabric of this nation. But at the same time, something is seriously wrong when you see people marching through the streets of Washington carrying Hamas banners, literal Hamas banners, carrying the Hamas flag down the streets of Washington, D.C. When you see people spray painting on fountains in Washington that Hamas is coming, when you see them displaying signs calling for the death of Jews, when you see them burning American flags, it's despicable. It's hateful. It runs contrary to the values of this country. I think especially when you consider what that flag that we saw being burned yesterday stands for. And one of the things it stands for is the right to protest, the right to make your views known, make them known peacefully. It's one of the things that makes this country what it is and what it has been for almost 250 years. So I would say to anyone that is burning an American flag while spray painting pro-Hamas graffiti in Washington, to stop and think for a moment about what would happen if they were protesting Hamas's rule in Gaza. And it's not a question that you have to look very hard for an answer, because we know, because we've seen in the past. When people have protested in Hamas's rule in Gaza, we've seen how Hamas has responded. They responded with brutal crackdowns, with arrests, with violent repression. Fortunately, that is not who we are in this country. That is not who we are going to be in this country. We stand by, as I said, the right to protest, the right to dissent. And I know that the vast majority of people who were on the streets of Washington yesterday were patriotic Americans who were making their views known, even if they disagree with the choices that their elected officials make and the choices that we make, and we support their right to do so. But for those who were out yesterday showing support for Hamas, I would ask them to just think very hard about the choices they're making and who they are really supporting, because it is not peace, it's not democracy, and it is certainly not the values that we share as Americans.